I have worked with aborted fetuses. I have, during the course of my scientific studies, and I don't believe that the things that I have dealt with in the lab situation, which have come from abortions, are human beings. They look like them, they resemble them in physically, but they are not human beings.
Good Lord, I mean, this is concentration camp language.
The question is, though, I suppose...
They look like human beings, but no, they're not. They're Jews.
I mean...
I'm puzzled by that.
It's amazing. They're not human beings. It's the oldest thing in the book. Isn't it? Before you kill, you dehumanize. You say they're not really. No. I'm not. This isn't any kind of killing of a human being. It's something else. We declassify it. We give it another name. Give me strength. Okay, you want to believe that? You believe it, but it's the most perfect illustration of the position in which the person who acknowledges no absolute law gets himself into. He can argue himself within 10 minutes into the most appalling positions without even realizing that they're appalling. If the Ten Commandments are removed from this, then people will immediately say, oh no, abortion is not murder, it's just a blob of jelly. This thing doesn't matter, it's not a life, it doesn't count. Because people will always, just as they will do the same with the atrocious massacre of German civilians by bomber command during the 1940s, they'll always say, oh, that was all right, that was morally justified. People will always morally justify murder when they think it suits them. And they will keep on doing it, unless you have an absolute code which prevents it. And every opportunity I have to say it, I'll say it, because it just seems to me to be so blindingly obvious and such an immense wickedness in our society that if I didn't say it, even if it disadvantaged me to say it, then I would be failing in my duty.
But what's your view of abortion?
I'm completely opposed to abortion. Life begins at the point of conception.
So why are you prepared to say you're opposed to abortion, not opposed to the same-sex marriage?
But because it's a completely different kettle of fish. With abortion, it is something that is done to the unborn child.
Are you completely opposed to abortion in all circumstances?
Yes, I am.
Rape and incest?
Sexual violence?
I'm afraid so.
Really?
Life is sacrosanct and begins at the point of conception.
Here, the first is, at what point does a fertilised egg become a person? And there is no scientific consensus on this. There is no scientific definition of what that could possibly be.
You're slipping though from human to a person. You're trying to define human not as a physically objectively existing thing, but as a social being, which of course no one in a womb can be. So presumably you're not a person until the moment you're born, by that definition, but you're still a human.
Well,
I mean, this kind of sophistry is what you get when people want to justify killing for their own convenience.
24 weeks as the cut-off point is because there's no scientific evidence that younger fetuses than 24 weeks have an increased survival rate.
Listen to the word fetus. It's a fetus. It's a nice Latin word. It's dehumanized already. It's not a baby, it's a fetus.
That's correct.
It's dehumanized so you can kill it.
It's not a baby.
That's what killers always do. They dehumanize their victim before they kill it.
A fetus is not a baby, and there's no possible way that you could argue that a fetus is a baby.
Right.
Well, try it.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? But the one thing you cannot show on television is film of an abortion and what it involves, because it shows quite plainly that what is being destroyed is a human.
What gives you the moral authority to decide when a human life begins?
He's a scientist, that's why.
But the second point is why I feel morally justified in supporting abortions in principle, which is to do, I believe, with the mother's right to choose her own destiny, and to the extent that it is that it is an adult human is more important than an unborn, unsentient fetus, and I believe that is a moral absolute, and I don't see how you could argue against that.
You don't see how you could argue against it.
How do the rights?
That's another thing. I mean, I can see how you make your case. I can see exactly how you make it. I can see how you can arrive at your conclusion. I used to believe it, this piffle, but I can perfectly well see how you arrive at it. You can't see how anyone can imagine that what you call a fetus might be human and that it might be wrong to kill it.
I believe that education about sex education is important in preventing the negative aspects of sex.
Ever since we had sex education, we've had more abortion. We've had more out of wedlock and early pregnancy. We've had more sexually transmitted disease. I can't actually established because the work hasn't been done, that sex education leads to these things, but if its stated purpose is to reduce them, then it has failed abjectly ever since it began. It's a mathematical connection. In this country, sex education has been accompanied by an increase in all the things it claims to prevent and contain.
Well, you assert that, and correlation and causation are not the same. But let me ask you this then: in place of sex education, which attempts to reduce the negative aspects of sex, such as unwanted pregnancies and STDs, what would you have in its place?
No, anything in its place. I don't think it's the business of schools to teach people how to put condoms on hockey sticks and bananas. I think the schools are not there for this purpose. I think sex education, I think, is what George Lukács thought when he introduced it during the Hungarian Bolshevik uprising, was always an attempt to debauch and demoralize Christian societies. That's what its purpose is.
But children are going to have sex. Teenagers are going to have sex. Yes.
Are they?
Yes.
Are you sure? Are they going to have sex under all circumstances?
16-year-olds shouldn't have sex.
I'm saying that people shouldn't have sex outside marriage. That's my belief.
And so how do you engender that? So I don't believe there are any.
By having a strong moral system, which makes it plain that this is how people should behave.
And you think that will prevent teenagers from having sex with each other?
To a large extent, yes, it will. No human system is infallible. Humans are, as we know, or as I know, fallen creatures. So yes, there will be people who defy that morality, but you don't actually need to make much effort to study our own society's past to see just how much horror and dislike were actually directed against adultery and against premarital and extramarital sex, and how our society was different. You may say that it was worse than it was, and I may say that it was better, but there's absolutely no question that a strong morality generally accepted changes the behavior of society and makes it different. And one of the things it makes different is the attitude towards children, who in our society are disposable in the womb and neglected and tossed aside in life, with catastrophic consequences.
Abortion is put forward as the liberation of women. On the contrary, it has been, especially since the 1967 Act, the liberation of irresponsible and selfish men who were not prepared to fulfill their responsibility. That is one of the reasons why it remains so politically popular. Secondly, we're told by Mara that she wishes to be absolutely autonomous in this matter, that the person who has the baby needs to be absolutely autonomous and has to have the decision entirely left to herself. Well, first of all, a baby is not a disease. Or a medical problem. It is a new life. And secondly, there is a baby involved, and it seems to me that if you are going to insist so very furiously on the individual rights of the woman, then you cannot conceivably ignore or deny or simply sweep aside the right to life of the baby. And it is absurd to treat the one as absolute and the other as non-existent. My own view has been, the question of rape or incest is very difficult indeed for anybody who values human life. But my own point that I would make to almost anybody is, can anybody really, really deep inside their conscience, having seen a living baby, and indeed many babies now born at stages where they can be aborted, who've seen a living baby, can any of them really say that the killing of that baby, a human person, was a better solution than the adoption of that baby by somebody else? If the mother really does not want the baby, there are plenty of people who do. I don't think anybody in this country over the age of 11 who doesn't know how babies are made. Contraception has never been so readily available. You can walk into a chemist shop and get a morning after pill. A large number of abortions, as you well know, are not first abortions or even second abortions or even third, but fourth and fifth abortions by the same people. This is being used as contraception partly because of the policy that's been encouraged. In the old Soviet Union, where it was encouraged much as it was here, in the end the number of abortions outnumbered live births, and we could approach that position. But the real problem with
also have the problem of gender.
There is a real problem, a conscience problem, taking away the law.
We also have a feeling of sex selection.
May I just make this very, very important point?
Which is getting worse in this country.
At present, a doctor or a nurse or a midwife who refuses to, on grounds of conscience, to be involved in performing an abortion can pretty much do so. Once the decriminalisers have got their way, the pressure will be on those doctors and nurses who in conscience do not wish to do this, to do it. And the whole situation will turn over from one where it's fundamentally a bad thing to one where it's fundamentally a good thing and everyone has to like it.